Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of Kabbalah Explained Simply. I'm Gianni, and today we're talking about the creation versus evolution debate. Actually, the title is Above the Creation or Evolution Debate. And why do we say above? It's because Kabbalah obviously isn't taking a position on one side or the other. And depending on how much you know about Kabbalah, you might think that we would be on one side or the other. We'd be definitely on the creationism side, or definitely on the Darwinian evolution side of things, or maybe on the intelligent design side of things. So we'll sort all of this out today. And let's start with the position of Kabbalah on this. So the whole of humanity, all of the universe that has ever existed, including all of those seemingly evolutionary processes, they're not something that those fossils in the earth, that they're unrelated to me, that they're just something that are for museums. According to Kabbalah, it all relates to me. In fact, Kabbalists say that all of the worlds, everything in reality was created just for a person, if we know how to interpret it correctly. So let's talk about what's usually meant by evolution, first of all. So usually we're talking about Darwinian evolution, that through a gradual, stepwise process of change over millions and billions of years, everything evolved. And it evolved randomly through competition and random selection and the sorting out of the different properties, because if some property was more fit, then they'd be more likely to reproduce and pass their genes on, and this is how gradually everything evolved. Now, I need to humble myself, and how do I turn? I need to humble myself a little bit and understand that these processes are things that happened millions of years before I existed, and trying to make sense of them now, so long after so much time, if we weren't there to actually witness these processes, that's going to be challenging to do. It's not like experiments that we can carry out in a laboratory. It's kind of like that game Story Cubes, where you kind of roll a dice and you get something out of which you need to tell a story with, and you invent sort of a story. My wife was a scientist in one of the top laboratories, neuroscience laboratories in the world. And even there, out of the data that they gathered, they would say, with this data, what story are we going to tell? And that's the way it kind of is with evolution. Though we have very sophisticated ways of telling the story of what's going on, it's still not exactly clear what happened throughout millions of years. And that's why there's room for some of the greatest minds, some of the greatest scientists, equally genius scientists, to say opposite things, right? There are scientists who say that the process totally could have occurred by Darwinian means, and that's probably what happens. And there's ironclad evidence that that's what happens. And then there's also scientists that say the opposite, right? They say that it had to happen by design, Of course, there's also the creationist side that says, you know, it happened by miracles, right? But let's talk about regular scientists. Most scientists are either in the intelligent design camp or in the Darwinian evolution camp. Or there's some hybrid of the two where they think that maybe it's designed, but it does happen by Darwinian means. And here's what the Kabbalist Bala Sulam says. I think this will add to the discussion here. If you take the body of a small animal, and we're not talking about like a fossil here, right? That we need to wonder what's happening. A small animal right in front of us. If you take the body of a small animal whose only task is to nourish itself so it may exist in this world for enough time to father and carry on its species, you'll find in it a complex structure of millions of fibers and tendons. As physiologists and anatomists have discovered, and there is much there that humans have yet to find. So what Bala Sulam is saying here is that even if we just look at the organs of a small animal, we're going to discover that later on we'll have to change all of our theories, just like we always have in science. We're very certain that we came to some strong conclusions, and we know the way now, we saw the light, and then a few decades later, the science tends to change. We come to new data and we understand something new. And this is the case with even a single animal, that we have a grain of sand versus a sandy beach. That's our level of knowledge about even one single small animal that's right in front of us. Let alone talking about all animals together, let alone talking about things that happened in the animal kingdom billions of years ago. And so we just need to be humble, right, when we talk about evolution, about animal evolution, or if we talk about the evolution of the universe, because we also weren't there to see the Big Bang happen, though we can look at background radiation and take different measurements, and we have a very sophisticated system of measuring these things, but still, it's before our time, and we need to kind of humble ourselves a bit. And later on, when we attain what Kabbalists attained, where they attain the whole of creation from beginning to end. And by attainment, we mean literally like holding something in your hand. Not taking different measurements and telling a story about it, but holding it in your hand. Only then will we really understand what these processes are, the evolutionary processes, and what actually happened. And that's why on the creation versus evolution debate, of course, Kabbalah doesn't take either of the position, because there's no chance that human beings being born into this world after the Big Bang, after billions of years of evolution, that suddenly I'm born into a world and I'll be able to correctly discern exactly what's going on in this reality. I'm too late and I don't have enough access to the mechanisms of nature. And there are deeper levels of nature that I don't have access to that are actually operating our level of reality. So if I want to understand all of the sciences, all of nature, all of its processes, I need to actually attain these deeper levels of nature. If I don't attain them, then what happens is that my position on these things ends up being pretty much based on how I approach reality. Meaning, what is my approach to the upper force? Now, in the Enlightenment era, for example, let's go back even further. Before that, everything was a miracle, right? You would pray to different gods and hope that because the forces of nature seemed like something superior, so they were like gods. So you would pray to the god of the Nile, the god of fire, and so on. And later on, this became, it got consolidated into one god in many religions. But in general, the approach was that things in nature are miraculous and unpredictable. Then we started calculating and seeing that there is kind of a set of laws that's operating things. So during the Enlightenment era, there had already come this idea of a singular God. And scientists just felt themselves discovering the laws of God, the laws that God created in nature. The planets turn because God made them so. And if I'll research the details of how he made them so, it doesn't deny God at all. Later on, though, there became scientists, like we have during the 20th century especially, scientists who were looking for a way to not have God in the picture, a way that the universe could be working where there is no God involved, right? So there's different approaches, and since we're so limited in our understanding of what is happening, like Bala Sulam says, even a single animal, we don't really understand the billions of mechanisms that are working there. We have a very simplistic understanding, let alone when we look at our whole reality, our understanding is very, very limited. And therefore, since there's this limitation, my whole approach ends up being based on my approach to the upper force. And then depending on my internal attitude towards the upper force, meaning maybe I'm more atheistic, maybe I would like there to be a creator, then I tend to find information that backs that theory up. Kabbalah is going to say that it's actually neither one of the different sides on this debate, but it's something above it. Now, these different approaches, though, that could be are basically these. It's either that everything happens miraculously, everything happens by itself, right? That's kind of the Darwinian approach. Or everything is initialized by the upper force, by the creator, but the creator has abandoned his operation. And you can have a million different scientific approaches, but they all pretty much boil down to these. Okay, so you'll find this basis behind all of the different approaches. And by the way, we said that this evolution conversation is just a way of talking about us and how our relationship to reality influences our lives. And this is the approach people have also just to day-to-day life as well. And we don't necessarily know that we're in these different approaches on a daily basis. And maybe we don't think about them. I don't understand that this is how I'm relating to reality. But really, these are kind of the three possibilities. Things are happening by themselves. This is kind of I don't want to say childish, but this is the way a child is. If you have kids, you see that the glass broke. It broke. What broke it? No, it just broke by itself. It can do things can happen by themselves. Later on, as we develop further, we understand that there is always a cause for everything that happens. The third approach is that, let's say there is a creator. I'm saying that, yeah, there had to be, the universe can't just be happening all by itself. There had to be something, someone, if you want, that started it all. So let's say maybe it's a creator of some kind, but he's no longer involved, right? He left human beings to their own devices. That's why I'm living in a reality now where I don't feel that there's a creator. Maybe I believe that there's a creator, but it's not that I feel the creator, like you're feeling me now, like you're seeing me now. It's not that I have such a relationship with him like that. I have a relationship with my wife, with my kids, with my boss, but with the creator, no. So probably he started the whole process, maybe exists somewhere, maybe we'll meet him afterwards, but he's no longer here. And yeah, if we divide these into creationism, Darwinism, and intelligent design, these are the three approaches. Darwinism basically says, or one, and of course these divide into many different strands. You know, there are some intelligent design people who believe that it started with God. There are some creationists who believe that maybe evolution is unfolding by lawful laws and processes. However, they were all designed by the creator. So there's some crossover, but these are the main ones. These are the main approaches. And like we said, it all depends on your approach to the upper force. Now, where does Kabbalah stand on evolution? It doesn't actually fall into any of these categories because these categories are invented by human beings. And a Kabbalist who attains the upper reality, because there are deeper levels to nature than what we are currently feeling. A Kabbalist who attains that attains all of the laws of nature, all of the laws of reality. And if you would have attained it 5,000 years ago, you would have discovered those laws. And if you attain Kabbalah, what Kabbalists attain, if you attain it right now, which you all have the possibility of doing, every human being has the possibility of doing so. If you attain that, you attain the same things that Kabbalists attained. And that never changes. It's the same laws of reality. And I'm trying to see the comments here. If I can see your comments and your questions, it would be great. Have the possibility of... Okay, here we go. And so the only thing that would change between a Kabbalist 5,000 years ago talking about evolution and a Kabbalist now talking about evolution is that human beings now have science. There's researchers. It's very sophisticated. It's very smart. And there's a lot of words around it trying to figure out what's going on in reality. And therefore, we can take some of the words that scientists are using and use those words, even though Kabbalah doesn't take a position on creation, you know, whether it's creationism or intelligent design or Darwinism, but we can take some of those words and talk about what Kabbalists attain. Whereas we couldn't do that 5,000 years ago. There just weren't words and nobody would know what you're talking about. So we have a lot of fossils and a lot of evidence and a lot of theories. And even if none of them turn out to be correct, according to the truth that each and every person will attain when they attain spirituality, we can still start to discuss the matter. Now, this is interesting. There's a cartoon here by a guy named Rube Goldberg, and it's a good example for us. It's a good example. Because when we look at this cartoon, we see it's a ridiculously complicated mechanism that's happening here. If the guy here doesn't get hit by the basket, then he doesn't fall. And if he doesn't fall, then the ball doesn't go into the hoop. And if it doesn't go into the hoop, then it doesn't hit the tennis racket, and it doesn't start the goat moving on its little tread wheel there. And all of this, all of these many actions are just in order. At the very end there, you see letter L. It's all in order to sharpen that knife, right? And the thing about this is that everything has to happen perfectly. If a single part of this mechanism is missing, and you'll see how this relates to both evolution and to Kabbalah in a minute, if everything doesn't happen perfectly, or if you're missing a single element in this equation, nothing's going to work. And it's not just that it won't work and maybe we could use this mechanism for another purpose. Rather, it's just because it becomes this giant mess, this waste of space that really is useful for nothing and is actually not economic. It's filling up my room. It's taking up space. And so everything has to work together perfectly. So in relation to evolution, some say that our universe is built in this way, meaning it's irreducibly complex. And this happens at the level of physics. This happens at the level of biology. At the level of physics, physicists discover that they say there are over 200 laws of physics that have to be just so. So it's like they're finely tuned, and if they would go just one gradation to the left, to the right, there wouldn't be life on Earth at all. And there's over 200 laws like that. And the probability of all of those coming together in one mechanism is so low that we would call that a miracle. It's like Googleplex, some crazy number of low probability of it happening. And that's why they say that our universe is like this Rube Goldberg cartoon. It's irreducibly complex, and therefore it has to be designed. There has to be a designer of the universe. When we talk about the perspective of Kabbalah on this, we'll see that it's even more complex than they think. But people have found ways to get around this. So there are some scientists who say that physics-wise, our universe is irreducibly complex. There are others who say, no, there's other ways around this. Look, we maybe, and we can't measure this, but they've proposed different options that maybe there's multiple universes. This is called the multiple universe theory, multiverse theory. And it says, look, it doesn't matter how unlikely our universe is. Even if that number of likelihood is approaching infinity, guess what? There's infinite number of universes. And we just happen to be in the one that was built like that. There's infinite universes that are all built in different ways, some of which we do not feel. There's different worlds that we don't feel. And we just happen to be in the one that works for us, and that's why it looks like a miracle. Boom. There's the anthropic principle. It says that our universe had to be one that is compatible with intelligent life. Otherwise, there would be nobody here to observe it. There's the naturalistic approach, which says that life could exist under a variety of conditions, perhaps in different forms than those with which we're familiar. So they're saying it's not so stringent. It's not that there's 200 laws that had to be that way. There could have been slightly different laws of physics, and some kind of life could have existed. And then there's the self-organizing principle. This says there doesn't have to be someone behind things that happen. The universe is organizing itself. And this is kind of like the child, that says the glass broke. It broke. How did it break? It broke. And the child really feels this way, that it broke. I didn't bump it. You know, they don't know how it happened. So these are different approaches that serious, and I'm not making fun of it, serious, intelligent, even genius level people are on board with. These are different possibilities. Now, I'm just going to touch on these since we brought them up to let you know that there is a Kabbalistic way that these things can all be correct. Maybe the conclusions that people come to, and also with the creationism versus Darwinism, there's a way that they're correct. Maybe just how we're accepting them isn't correct. Meaning the way in which I feel that maybe I can eliminate other people's opinions and that mine will be right, you know, because the creationists think evolutionary biology is moronic. Just, you know, believe that the creator did it and call it a day. The intelligent design people, some of them, think that Darwinian evolution is ridiculous, that you think that things are organizing by way of natural selection and you could get all the variety, the multiplicity of species by accident. They think that's ridiculous. And then the evolutionary biologists often think that intelligent design is ridiculous. It's just a sneaky way of bringing God back into the equation, right? And that's what they want to avoid at all costs. So Kabbalists, they have a different opinion. No one's right. No one's right. Everyone, all of these opinions have a way that they come together above the differences. And in the end of correction, in the end of this whole thing that's playing out in reality with the universe and us, it's written by Kabbalists that there's a lot of laughter. It's the biggest laughter and joy that we're laughing at all of the things that we've been through and how we wanted to be right with just one side of things. It turns out that it's going to be above all of that. And no one will be all right and no one will be all wrong. Everyone was right in a way, but the truth is actually above all of the separate opinions. So I'm just giving this example here that multiverse, okay, it's a fantasy. We have no proof of that. It's an escape from what looks like irreducible complexity, what looks like it might be designed. But Kabbalah says that you're right. Actually, there are multiple universes. Actually, there are 5. There are 5 worlds. Adam Kenmon, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, and any person can attain these deeper levels of reality. About the anthropic principle that our universe had to be the one that's compatible with intelligent life. That's why it looks miraculous, but no, it's not. It's just the one that's perfect for us. And Kabbalah says, true, this is the perfect reality for our development. You're right. It is actually orchestrated as the perfect place. It's not accidental. It's not a place that we're stopping off at on the way to somewhere else. It is perfect for what it's designed for. There's lots of inventions that if I didn't know what they are, could look really stupid. You know, if I saw the Hadron Collider maybe 1,000 years ago, it looked like a big hunk of, you know, it's just in the way. I don't know. What do we do with this? Right? The same thing with our whole reality. That if I don't know what it's for, it looks mistaken. It looks like things are bad, but that's because I don't know what it's for. It's actually perfect. Naturalistic approach. Life could exist under a variety of conditions, perhaps in different forms than those that with which we're familiar. Kabbalah says, yes, there are different forms of existence that we don't perceive. That's not wrong. Self-organizing universe. Well, it's not right in the way that we're just here accidentally and there's nothing more to reality, this nihilistic approach that, you know, I might as well just, kill myself then. There's no reason to live. Kabbalah says no. Nature is organizing itself, but it's organizing by a singular principle, meaning it has a goal towards which every single piece of reality is leading. And there's nothing accidental. And yet, this is still different than intelligent design. If we're talking about the intelligent designs theory, it's still above that. So we'll see. But this problem of irreducible complexity, like we said with that cartoon, they find this also at the biological level. In the blood clotting system, this is a this is the little bacterial flagellum, the little outboard motor on bacteria, and they give this as an example. If on the universe level, we have those 200 laws, they say that this here is like a little hadron collider inside bacteria. And they give this as an example of something that is really irreducibly complex. It's so complex, and everything has to work together and all at the same time. And there's no way that it could have evolved one by one, because it's useless until you have everything together all at once. And so it is really, it's like this. It's something that is just so complex and useless for any other purpose than the one that works when all of the parts are fully formed and all of them work together. So that's the argument that intelligent design proponents make. That's not the argument that I'm making. But what I do want to point out is that in the face of these things, in the face of new data that emerges, very intelligent people come to disparate opinions, and even sometimes flip-flop, even sometimes switch their opinion. For example, reported in the Guardian newspaper was as follows. Professor Anthony Flew, the rationalist philosopher who died on April 8th at age 87, spent much of his life denying the existence of God until in 2004, he dramatically changed his mind. After months of soul-searching, Flew concluded that research into DNA had shown by the almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life that intelligence must have been involved. Moreover, though he accepted Darwinian evolution, he felt that it could not explain the beginnings of life. I've been persuaded that it's simply out of the question that the first living matter evolved out of dead matter and then developed into an extraordinarily complicated creature, he said. Francis Crick, he won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA. He said, an honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have to have been satisfied to get it going. Francis Collins, director of the Human Genome Project, said, with quantum mechanical uncertainty and the chaotic unpredictability of complex systems, the world is now understood to have a certain freedom in its future of development. It's thus perfectly possible that God might influence the creation in subtle ways that are unrecognizable to scientific observation. In this way, modern science opens the door to divine action without the need for law-breaking miracles. Okay, so that's what he says. And then this was a comment that my teacher, our teacher, Dr. Lightman, said. Science leads us to the realization of the beginning in nature, the cause, plan of development and goal. However, scientists do not have a complete picture of the universe, including our world as part of it. For this, there is the science of the actions of the Creator, Kabbalah. But the God of religions does not exist. There's nature, the laws, properties, and interactions that can be revealed and attained to the extent of similarity with these properties. Okay, now we need to understand what this actually means. And why this is not actually taking the creationist approach, it's not taking the intelligent design approach, and it's not taking the Darwinian approach either. We'll see. Now, here's what Bala Sulam, the great Kabbalist Bala Sulam, writes in his article, The Meaning of Conception and Birth. He says, it's impossible to examine anything before you see it from its beginning to its end. And elsewhere he writes, a person is like a book whose first half is missing, so its content cannot be understood at all. So this is why I said it's hard to just be born into this reality and start digging up fossils and telling stories about it, and to understand what really is going on and how perhaps all of it relates to me. And because this is the situation I'm in, that if I don't know the beginning of creation and also where it's heading, then I'm very confused. It's like opening up a really well-plotted book right in the middle and then trying to figure out what's going on. Things seem random and kind of pointless, and this is the way we are in relation to creation. And this is the way we are in each moment of our lives. We don't know exactly what we're living for because we don't know where we came from and where we're going. Now, let me look into the chat here. Okay, it's great to have you guys here. We have friends from Utah, Denmark, Michigan, Romania, Netherlands, Ohio, Antwerp, North Virginia, New Mexico. Okay, the volume is good. France. All right, I could try to turn up my volume a little bit if that's a problem. Okay, let's see. So Marco is asking, I'm going to just take a quick question break here. Marco is asking, is there such a thing as a regular gathering to discuss Kabbalah, like in person? I think everyone is used to the virtual environment now. And we do have some physical gatherings. Like we have a retreat coming up in Amsterdam, a few miles outside of Amsterdam. It's like a camp. It's like a campfire setting with lots of lessons and things like that. Events, meals, music. Yes, we do have those physical things. We also have an environment where you can learn the wisdom of Kabbalah. This is a little unidirectional, right? It's me to you, except when I'm taking your questions. In KabU, we actually provide an environment where you can see faces, you can be with live instructors. There we go into breakout rooms, you can talk to each other, do workshops together. We have all of that. And you can sign up on our site. And we have some great asynchronous courses there as well. We have one really related to what we're talking about now called Structure of Creation. Blueprint of Creation. And that's where we go through the entire plan of creation, starting from the beginning, how it all got started with the initial thought of creation, down to our world and what we do now, how we climb back up. So we learn that whole process. Let's see, any other questions? Okay, lots of comments. So let's get back into this. So this is what Bala Sulam said, and this is what he means here, is that we need to, if a person is like a book whose first half is missing, so its content can't be understood at all, we need to learn what is that process that came before us, before the creation of our world, so that we can understand where we come from and then what comes afterwards, so that we can start heading towards that in a conscious way. So here Bala Sulam goes on. He says, actual things are found even in the corporeal reality set before our eyes. Although we have neither perception nor image of their essence, such are the electricity and the magnet. Nevertheless, who can say that these names are not real when we vividly and satisfactorily know their actions? We could not be more indifferent to the fact that we have no perception of the essence of the subject itself, namely electricity itself. Okay, why am I reading this? So we are so used to electricity and magnets that we call what happens when we use electricity, we call that electricity itself. But that's not really the electricity. When we plug the toaster in, what's happening there is a result of electricity that we know how to channel. And if it's not a toaster, it's different fields. Yes, we can follow it back to fields, electrons, and so on. But all of that is also just results of the phenomenon itself of electricity, which we never actually attain. We never actually attain electricity itself. And our whole reality is like this, that everything that we discover in nature, that we dig up bones or we see live animals and we're trying to make sense of this, all these things are results. They're like the metal pieces that are moving when there's a magnet above them, but we don't see the magnet. We don't see this big magnet that's hanging over the entire reality. And everything in our lives is a result of it. Everything is a result of this deeper layer of reality that is magnetizing everything, moving my hands right now, moving us in each and every moment. It's operating us. It's operating all of creation and always has. But Darwinism isn't totally wrong. It's also a little bit right. And in fact, a few hundred years before Darwin, Kabbalists said something similar. A Kabbalist by the name of the Ari wrote something about evolution. And here's what he said. He said, between each two phases, there is a median that contains both. For example, between the still and the vegetative, there is the coral. Biologists would call that a transitional species, right? Between the vegetative and the animate, there is the dog of the field mentioned in the Talmud. Now, of course, when this was written in the Talmud almost 2,000 years ago, it was talked about by scientists. Like that was probably, some fantasy there in the Jewish, holy books. They probably, maybe, it's fantasy because it's mentioned a few times there. And then the Ari writes about it about 500 years ago. And then a few years back, Canadian scientists, I believe, actually found this species. They found fossils from this that looks and sounds very similar to this dog of the field that Kabbalists always wrote about. How'd they write about it? Well, it's 500 million years old. Nobody was around at that time, human-wise. So how did they write about it? It's because they attain this upper level of reality, this deeper level of reality, where you have everything that's going to happen. Everything that's going to come out is there. It's at the root level of reality. And that's why they can know about these things in advance. He writes, it's like a dog that grows on the ground, but with its navel rooted in the soil from which it sucks its sustenance. When you cut off its navel, it dies. Between the animate and the speaking level, there is the ape. Now, who cares? Why are we talking about evolution in the first place? Why would a Kabbalist write about this? Isn't he writing about the upper worlds? Well, he wants to tell us something very important here. And that relates to our lives right now. Right now. But before that, I want to talk about this. This is a baby in a womb. When the baby, now if we look at it on a sonogram, it might look like random processes are happening, like this organ, then that organ, a little bit of this, a little bit of the ear, a little bit of the other thing. It looks kind of random, hodgepodge, like it might just be the womb might be learning how to make a baby here. But if we look at billions and billions of babies in wombs, we would discover that the exact same process is taking place and in the same order. There is an order to things happening there. And it's not random. And if I could only see this one womb, I could scientifically write down some notes and data that I'm kind of seeing a random process is what it looks like. And that's totally reasonable. And if we look at our whole reality and we look at the development of this fish and then that ape and different species, and this one looks like a false start, but then the human evolves it from this other strand, it looks maybe like there's randomness happening there. But that's only because I don't know the program. And the program isn't something that's coming out of our world. There's nothing that can evolve out of our world. Randomly, of course, it can't happen. And how does it happen? Well, it happens by the upper roots that they're unfolding, cascading, and then emerging in our world. Now, when we look at Bala Sulam, what he says here, he says, because why would that be the case? Why do we need this whole big confusion that we need to look at evolution and fight about who's right, creation versus design? Why? Why be confused? Well, Bala Sulam says it here. When looking at the seal of the work of creation, we find there the words which God has created to do. This means that the work of the Creator, which is said in the creation before us, is given to us in order to do and add to it. Otherwise, the words to do would have been completely redundant and meaningless, and he would have to say, for in it he rested from all his work, which God has created. So why were the words to do added here? It must be that this verse teaches us that the full extent of the work that the Creator has left in creation is in the exact measure, no more and no less, but the extent that enables us to perform its development and completion by ourselves. Know that the Creator needed the work of creation only to the extent that human power could not work there. Similar to digestion, the Creator created everything in such a way that the digestion of the food in our stomach happens without effort on our part. In other words, of course, there is a Creator, and He wants, the whole point of creation is that He's not going to reveal Himself, and He doesn't exist somewhere yet. The way that He exists, and this is why creation isn't right, intelligent design isn't right, Darwinian evolution isn't right, because it's a bit different than all of those. That on the one hand, everything is cascading down from the upper worlds, and when some new thing needs to develop, it suddenly has this inspiration and it goes towards development. And it will have a push from behind as well to push it to move. So from behind and from the front. And this is according not to things that are happening into our world, but the order of roots in the upper world. And so it's not that each successive stage develops one from another. Rather, they develop one after the other, with no link between them, except that it looks like there's a link between them for us. Like if you do a flip book really quickly, or even what you're watching now, it's happening too. But if you do like a cartoon flip book and you're watching still frames that have nothing to do with each other, but if you play them one after the other very quickly, it looks like they're connected, right? It's even a sequence, your reality that you're watching there. And that's how it's working with us as well. And we're making conclusions that probably these things are linked because of such and such, but actually it's all happening by the sequence of roots that are coming out as branches in our world. Why would you do that? Why does the Creator need this whole confusion to let us fight about this and be confused? It's because, like, you're not doing any of the actions in your body right now, from beating your heart to your digestion and all of that stuff. All of evolution, what looks to us like evolution, is the part that the Creator did as a start to get the ball rolling, but after which we need to do something. And that's what Bala Sulam says here, is that all of creation that we see before us was the upper force doing the minimum that he could do so that we would perform our role. Now, we need to understand what our role is, otherwise we'll be very confused. Now, let's go back to the Ari. What does he say? He says, in much the same way, he was talking about the coral, the dog of the field, the ape, and then you have the human degree, and in much the same way, there is a median phase between the Creator and the created being, which is the spiritual general phase. So we're not at the final state of evolution, and it's not that we have nothing to do right now except for philosophize about evolution and fight over it and just figure that out, and then there's no point to life. Rather, evolution isn't completed. It's just started, actually. And there's a whole process that we need to go through. We fell down from the upper worlds, and we don't know about this, but we had the Big Bang, right? And then billions of years of development. And all of that was so that we could discover the greatest thing that there is, which is being like the one who created us, the one who started it all. Now, how do we do this? I didn't bring up that idea of irreducible complexity for no reason. So it turns out that our whole reality is like a Rube Goldberg cartoon, where it's not that there are 8 billion people, a bunch of idiots over there. Who needs most of them? I disagree with at least half of them. It turns out that we're all one thing. Including, by the way, including all of the previous generations and all of the future generations of human beings and all of the animals and all of the ones that look like false starts, mistakes, these pre-human forms, primordial humans that didn't make it, dinosaurs. They're all part of one system, the absence of any one of which will render the entire system kerplunk, totally useless. And so we need everyone. We need all of these desires, and we need to connect them all into one thing. And this one irreducibly complex system is all of humanity, with all of nature, including the entire universe. And it all comes down to a person. It comes down to an individual, that is you, and it doesn't matter who it is, it's you. It's all inside you, and you have a place in this evolutionary process, and it doesn't take billions of years. You simply, and each of us, need to learn our place in it, our place in the system. Now, I drew these 5 lines going down, a few lines going across, and a few lines going up. But in our Structure of Creation course in Kabbalah, we talk about really this whole system of evolution. What is inside of these? There's 125 degrees going down and 125 degrees going up. And we learn about these degrees. When we learn about them, we actually start drawing forces from those states which work on us and develop us more quickly towards them. By developing towards them more quickly than the natural process by which nature is developing us, we start feeling balanced because we're balancing with that system. And all of the pain, it turns out, that I've ever felt is from being out of balance with that system. So all I need to do is, I don't need to solve the whole, how do I connect to all of reality, all of the species, all of the humans. I need to make one tiny step forward, just a little bit, let's say quicker, a little bit more energetically towards my next evolutionary state. So I think I did tie everything together. We didn't have a lot of time. We had to go pretty quickly. We have another session now for Kabbalah students only. It's going to be on a Zoom. But I hope that was enlightening. And if you have questions, you can also type them in the chat. If I didn't get to your question today, maybe I could do 1 minute blitz of just answering a couple questions out of here. So, because they're probably relevant. But if I don't get to your question, because we have 1 minute left, you can type it into the video, under the video chat area once it gets posted, and I will go in and answer them there. But Sharon is saying, I thought that there was no time. That's right. There's no time. That's why I said that all of evolution, everything that ever happened, is influencing one another, all generations above time, just like the organs inside the womb are actually all relevant. Look, we used to think the tailbones are relevant, the tonsils are irrelevant. Then they discover, they perform a really important immune system purpose or something like that. We'll discover later that there's nothing in our body that's just some relic of evolution that serves no purpose. It's all integral, all absolutely necessary. And the same thing with all of humanity. We'll discover that all of these people are totally relevant to the single soul to which we all belong. We only need to attain that soul, to start feeling it, and inside of it, we feel a sublime reality. So thank you all for joining. I know that it will take some time for this to sink in, and we definitely go into it more deeply when we in our courses. And thank you for your questions and your participation.